guys, good afternoon. It's Search Warrant. I'm Jake Jacobs, former Philadelphia homicide detective, along with Bilbo McBaggins, aka Greg Highlands, former NCIS investigator. Our fearless leader, John Snedden, will be with us in the coming weeks, but we wish him the best right now. Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to discuss the ongoing topics in the world, which is Iran.
We're at war, Jim. We're at war with Iran.
Yes, we're at war with Iran. We also, if we have time, we may discuss the Epstein/Clinton fraud stuff and maybe the Minnesota fraud stuff, since we had Ellison and Walls testifying in front of Congress, which we might can use a few of those $1 billion to use in buying the weapons we need to target and finish off Iran. Our special guest today, well, before we get into our special guest, we want to show you some of the current stuff that's going on with Iran, like Tehran today, and also our military actually had an outstanding feat that hasn't been done in some 70, 80 years. They sank an Iranian ship. Bill, do you have that video?
What? از اینجا میاد اینجا.
And that was Tehran today, and that was Tehran or off the coast of Sri Lanka yesterday with that ship being sunk. You know, a lot of people are talking about how did we get here? And there's various arguments to how we got here. But one thing that resonated for me a long time ago happened in 1983. And the reason I bring that up is because a lot of people compare President Donald J. Trump to President Ronald Reagan, both of whom I admire. But in 1983, while our brave servicemen and women were asleep in their barracks in Beirut, Lebanon, some coward drove a truck bomb into the hotel where they were staying and blew it up, killed over 200 service members, and who knows how many were maimed and permanently injured. And that happened in 1983. And the difference, when you hear all these people in Congress say whatever their opinions are about why we did or why we didn't do, I just don't hold that with any high regard. What I do know is in 1983, we did not avenge their loss and their deaths and their bravery. And I'm hoping, because a lot of those people who was involved in that 1983, which is, maybe 40 years ago, it's probably a lot of people that are dying today who participated in that atrocious act against us. Bill, can you bring up that Beirut, Lebanon bombing? Can you play it?
We have a bulletin from the Pentagon on the explosion in Beirut at the U.S. Marines barracks. The Pentagon now estimates that 120, possibly more, 120 American Marines have been killed. 45 of the more critically wounded have been evacuated. Others remain to be evacuated later. Again, 120 at...
I don't know if you guys can hear the audio.
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I'm going to continue it, but I want to make sure that you guys can hear that.
Well, I could, now I can't.
Unfortunately, I think the video is glitching, but maybe you can, because I can't control it on my end, guys. But
Let me
maybe
see
you
if
can,
I could.
because you're sharing the window. I don't have control of the audio. You got to play that file on your end.
Least by the Pentagon
There you go.
estimate, killed when a truck loaded with explosives broke through a gate into the lobby of a building in Beirut occupied by Marines, still asleep, most of them, at 6:20 a.m. their time this morning.
The Marines said a speeding pickup truck crashed through barriers and exploded in the lobby of the headquarters building where Marines were sleeping. The blast opened a crater 30 feet deep and 40 feet across, causing the four-story structure to collapse, killing, trapping, and injuring those inside.
Okay, that's my 2 cents. Now, we have a special guest, and we're going to talk all things Iran. We're going to talk, like I said, we're going to speak about the Clintons, hopefully, and the fraud in Minnesota, hopefully, if we got enough time. Bill, can you bring up Jason Goodman?
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me back. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks for coming on.
Good to see
What
you.
have you been up to before we get into the Iran topics?
Well, the last time we spoke, we were talking about Charlie Kirk, and that still remains a mystery, but there's so much more going on in the world. In my end of the world, there seem to be a lot of social engineers who have entered that area, that investigation. And when I say that, I mean people who sort of infiltrate social media, much in the same way that we learned during the church committee hearings, the CIA had infiltrated major news media through Operation Mockingbird. I suspect that continues to happen today with social engineers in social media. But I think we need to talk about the escalating military activity in Iran, and as you said, Jake, all the stuff going on with the Clintons testifying and Ellison test. There's a lot of people going to testify.
It's time for people to start getting arrested, in my opinion. So, what are your thoughts on this Iran conflict, war, dispute, however you want to label it?
Well, I'm always concerned whenever something like this happens. Obviously, one of the biggest concerns, I think, for everybody in the United States is the precarious situation our economy is in. When you see gold surging to well over $5,000 an ounce, what that really means is the value of the dollar is plunging. And I mean, I know my salary hasn't doubled in the past 24 months. So everything that I need to buy, food and energy, is really expensive. So life becomes more difficult when people can't afford the necessities. And I just, irrespective of the geopolitical ramifications and the ideological ramifications of what's going on in Iran, I'm just concerned when I travel around the United States and I see New York, Kansas City, Chicago, Atlanta, our great cities, Detroit, they're all dilapidated. You guys, Philadelphia, I mean, these places compared to even the 1990s, we've got kind of a disaster on our hands. So I always get concerned when billions of dollars are spent destroying other places rather than rejuvenating the United States. However, I think there's another problem happening, and you guys have seen this. There's a lot of conflict within the United States and fomenting on social media, where there's really been an increase in, let's call it, polarization, much more so than when I was a kid, where people want to openly blame Israel and, by extension, any Jewish person for what is going on. And I think it's important to remember that the United States has had an interest and a lot of covert activity going on in Iran, going well back to even before Israel was a nation. The CIA deposed and eliminated Mossadegh and installed the Shah. This activity went on back in the 1950s. I'm sure you guys remember 1979, the Iranian U.S. hostage incident. There was a Ben Affleck movie about that called Argo, I think. And Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who was one of the students who took part in that whole hostage-taking effort, became the Iranian president. I had heard some stories that he was killed in this attack. I don't know if that's been confirmed, but it's obviously a very, dynamic situation, and I'm concerned anytime there's warfare going on. But I'm also concerned that there are a lot of people who are just being very partisan about it and want to go against Trump. And, it's kind of like when you have a brother who you fight with, and then somebody else comes to the fight, your fighting with the brother needs to stop, and you need to focus on who is this outside party and where, that's my attitude there.
When where I come from, it was like never getting into a fight with your girlfriend, with your sister's boyfriend. He bitches ain't going to jump on you. Greg, what are your thoughts on this Iranian-American conflict?
So, growing up, about the timeline that I did, one of the first memories I have is the '79 U.S. Embassy takeover, and our embassy employees and ambassadors being held hostage. And then the Ayatollah Khomeini and his presence, and then the '83 Beirut bombing that you talked about. That was Iranian-sponsored Hezbollah, and I think they were going by the name of they were the forerunner of Hezbollah at the time. And I joined the Marines in '87 as an infantryman, so that had a big impact. A lot of the DIs at Paris Island, there was a few of those that were involved in the Beirut operation. So I have that, and then I have this memory of the sailors that were taken into custody by the Iranians in the port of Hormuz. And that really, I was working at that point as an agent with NCIS, and that didn't stick well in my heart that had happened, and the way they were kind of portrayed on the news. So, I think that we've had we have a deep history with Iran, and I like to kind of identify who we're talking about, which is kind of hard to do with a lot of the American public, because they don't know who we're talking about, the Iranian people and who they are versus their leadership. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's to the point where Jason's at with the fighting your family, and then let's take care our front doorstep, and then I'll meet you in the bedroom later on, brother. We can finish this, or when mom and dad go to work. And that's, I think, the rhetoric, whether it's social media, I think that exacerbates a lot of this situation. I think that's where you were going with also, Jason, where, and Greg saying, we don't know. You get a lot of confusing messages. We don't even know whether Ahmadinejad has been killed or not. I've heard reports that he may have been killed also. And it seems, like I said, people want to worry about, are we having boots? Is this going to be another Afghanistan? Was there really nuclear stuff? And I think America has a right to be inquisitive. And I think that some of their questions, within reason, should be answered. And how do you guys feel about that as far as what information should be out there? And do you believe that this strike at this time was warranted? Jason, you can go to you first.
You know, it's a big question. I mean, warranted. It's, again, I would prefer to see our money and resources being spent on peaceful efforts to improve our country rather than these, foreign wars. The founding fathers said to beware foreign entanglements, and it just seems like when one ends, another begins. So 20 years in Afghanistan, and they destroyed Iraq, and whether it's warranted or not, it's difficult for me to say. Obviously, there's tons of classified information that I don't know about. What we hear on the news is 98% false. It's just a question of warranted or not. Will it benefit the people of the United States? And I don't know. I'm very concerned about it. Obviously, like we've been saying, we're in it now. So I want to see a positive outcome. I'd like to see whatever military objectives are planned to be achieved quickly and end it. Hopefully that'll happen. Trump seems to, now we don't know, because whatever it was 6 months ago or 8 months ago when they did that obliteration strike, it seemed like, well, wait a minute, maybe that is just a precision military thing and not a big protracted war. Or maybe it was the first salvo in what will now be a 20-year-long war. So my primary concern, maybe people will find this selfish, but my primary concern is the United States, New York City, and I frankly, 25th Street, I'd like things to improve around here. And I'm really worried when, food at the supermarket is more expensive, crime is up, the police aren't able to be effective because the district attorney isn't prosecuting anybody, and the system here is breaking down. I'm just really concerned that we're out addressing whatever concern we might have in a country that's so far away that it seems like we probably could let it be while we deal with our problems. But again, there's a lot of complicated aspects of this that I just don't know enough about.
Jason, you brought up a lot of good points. I'm
Yes.
in lockstep with you here. So one, I put in the baggage from the Shire today for a general purpose is that I'm just a guy. Nobody gives a shit what my opinion is. But you bring up points that I think a lot of people in my situation who are like me. So we've just had a war with Afghanistan, 2001. That my understanding is we're still giving a couple $1 million a day to the Taliban. And then we had a war with Iraq, and then, I'm not sure how successful we were on giving them democracy. So here we are, that was 20 some years. And so here we are, in our lifetimes, we have this cycle of how the United States does business. We go over and we blow the shit out of the country, and then we come and we rebuild it. And my understanding, you correct me if I'm wrong, anybody correct me if I'm wrong, that is on the back of the U.S. taxpayers.
Right.
So we send these really expensive missiles over there to blow the shit out of everything, and then we're going to go and rebuild it for them. And so I guess my question is, as the guy from the Shire, is, so how many people are we going to drop missiles on before we get the right person to actually, that we're gonna like that person? So is the goal? I listened to the Secretary of Defense Hegseth just a little bit ago before we did the show, and I listened to President Trump. So we're going to just blow the shit out of them until we get the right guy to put into office. Is that the policy?
Well, sorry to interrupt, but there's an important wrinkle to what you're saying, Greg. It's not only that the burden of these military efforts falls on the U.S. taxpayer. The rebuilding of these places, and even the missiles that are purchased and the military equipment that's purchased to execute these activities, those benefits, those financial benefits generally go to corporations,
Exactly.
Lockheed Martin and all these military industrial complex companies. And so they obviously are highly motivated to convince everyone, politicians, the public, or whatever, that this is in our best interest to do this because they want to make billions. So, I mean, again, from a strictly economic standpoint, I think most anyone would have to agree. If you financially incentivize something, you're going to get more of it. And we have this really perverse financial incentive toward war. And as I said, you walk around New York City or any of the cities I've named, there seems to be no financial incentive to actually improve the lives of the American people. And that's my biggest concern, without going into any of the details of what may happen in Iran or whether, it's just, how can we be doing this? It's like if you owe $10,000 on your credit card, what are you doing going to the sushi restaurant?
Right.
And that, I guess, the wording of warranted. And that's the thing. Do we believe that what they're doing now, and I guess from you guys' answers, is still kind of cloudy. Do we believe? Did y'all lose me?
Yeah. We hear you, but no picture.
Okay, I don't know what happened to the picture, but what I'll do, I'll continue to talk. Do we believe that this will, in the long run, benefit America? Like I said, we'll talk about fraud and everything because it seems as though, when you talk about the financial benefits, all these things do not seem to benefit what our government does not benefit the American people. You talked about locally 25th Street police officers, DA Bragg, and things of that nature. But yet we over here in Iran worried about those people. But meanwhile, you want to demask ICE officers so they can be slaughtered in the streets, but you don't want Iranians to be slaughtered in the street. I'm going to toss to you guys while I figure out how you can chew on that while I figure out how to get my picture back up.
So you brought up some great points, Jason, earlier. So, this is such a multi-dimensional cause and effect thing, and you want to hope that somebody has our best interest in mind. I had saw a video earlier, and I'd hoped to get it up on the screen today. And I actually looked at the source of who produced this video, and they were kind of connecting the dots that this was based on a long play to affect China with the oil that Iran has, that China depends heavily on Venezuelan and Iranian oil, and this is a way to kind of prevent them from being able to affect their supply chain. I know I'm stumbling there, but I think you can kind of see where I'm going.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, the thing that I wonder about is this not a 30-year obsolete plan from a bunch of old guys? Because I think from China's point of view, they say, okay, fine, do what you want to do with the oil. We're building 1 million solar power plants, and we're going to modernize our electric grid. You look at these charts. I'm very interested in artificial intelligence, and one of the key bottlenecks that are kind of associated with the expansion of that technology is a tremendous need for energy. So there's a lot of charts and information talking about the amount of electricity that China is producing and how they're producing it. And, Elon Musk, who, like him or not, obviously smart guy, owns a lot of companies and develops a lot of technology. He talks about how, the sun is creating so much energy that even if current solar technologies aren't efficient or whatever, it's like 99.999% of all the energy in our solar system. And so by China, increasing the amount of electricity that they're producing so many times over what the United States is, it's kind of like a mathematical guarantee of their prosperity over ours. So again, I think if we're attacking Iran to affect China's energy infrastructure, that might have a short-term benefit from the standpoint of achieving that goal. But when you look at these conflicts that you've discussed, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, what you were involved in back in the 70s and 80s. By the time this gets done, China could be completely electrified and everybody's driving BYD cars that cost $20,000 and go 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. And they don't need any oil because they're doing everything with solar power or nuclear energy or whatever. So I don't know, this insane drive toward controlling energy and to do that via the monopolization of oil around the world. It seems like an idea from the 1960s, and it seems like an idea that has been decreasingly effective when we look at the last 20 or 30 years of life in the United States.
Exactly. Yeah. Definitely a good point.
I guess we lost Jake.
I think he's backing out and probably going to come back in.
Maybe he's texting you.
He's actually in the background. We got to get Bill to bring him to the front.
Yeah. Well, but anyway, again, I think, we're in it now. So it's like we're saying, when you're with your buddies in the bar and a fight starts and you're in the fight, you don't start criticizing your friend for starting the fight. You got to get it squared and get out of there and then have a discussion about it afterwards. Like, hey, you shouldn't have been doing that. And I don't know, maybe it's a bad analogy, but I just see, like, Tucker Carlson put out a video where my takeaway was, dude, why don't you just go move to Qatar if you love it so much? I mean, I've been to Dubai and, it's one of these things. You don't have to go around the world to see this. You go to Las Vegas, you can walk down the street and say, ooh, what a nice shopping mall and what a great restaurant and everything. Or you could look at the darker side of that. So yes, the streets of Dubai are gleaming and clean and nice, but it's a little bit of an autocratic, I don't think I want my country run like that by a king. And, Maktoum is the autocratic ruler of Dubai who locked his own daughter in prison. And I just, I'd like to peacefully coexist with these countries, but I don't know. Tucker Carlson's video was very strange to me. He was embracing this, Middle Eastern culture in a way that I don't necessarily agree with. Like I said, I want to peacefully coexist, let those countries over there do what they want to do and not be at war with them. But at the same time, I'm not going to take their side. And, we're in it now. So I would like this to go well and finish quickly and achieve the military outcomes that the United States military is pursuing.
Agreed. Yes. I like to watch and listen to some of Tucker Carlson and other folks, because you'll get bits and pieces of information from them that are useful. It doesn't mean that I agree with what he's saying, and in that aspect, you get, like I said, you just get pieces of information you wouldn't otherwise get, and you can go. Hopefully, people go and do their own research and figure out whether it's pertinent or not.
One of the most interesting things that I find, and Tucker Carlson is a good example because he's so well known and popular, and he came from Fox News, which is obviously a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar operation, and now he's in this podcasting space that we occupy, obviously not on the same level as him. But part of the problem is there's so much false information that people have been subjected to for so long. In my view, I don't know, you can put this on par with a kinetic war, but we've had, look, Alex Jones calls it an information war, and he's right. We've had this kind of psychological and information warfare going on in the United States over the past, let's call it 15 years, that I think is also unprecedented. And it's now manifesting in, look, when I grew up, hip hop was coming up and everything, and we never really thought about who's black and who's white. Like, everybody was just friends, hanging out. And listen, from my standpoint, obviously as a white person, maybe this is not a valid point of view, but it seemed to me like racial relations in the United States were better than ever, And now, since George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, it really feels like that's gone in an opposite direction that's very bad, where people coming up in high school now and college now are subjected to a kind of racism, whether they're black or white or Jewish or whatever. There's this polarizing hatred that is coming up that is really troubling to me. And I think that when Tucker Carlson kind of, espouses some of the things that he does, it feeds into a lot of these hate-filled stereotypes where, look, Israel is a country and they have their own geopolitical goals and all that. People have been saying that Trump is there we go.
Here we go.
People are saying that Trump is the Epstein administration and that this war in Iran is to cover up the Epstein files and that he's doing it because Netanyahu controls the United States. And again, when I say this as a Jewish person, people will say, oh, Jason is Mossad. But I just think it's a little ridiculous to presume that Israel controls everything, particularly when you look at the history of the United States. Just talking about this Iran engagement right now, the United States has been engaged in Iran probably due to oil or I don't even know what, but going back to the early 1950s. And I don't see how people could say that Israel was motivating that. Now, it does go to a topic that interests me, which is the concept of Freemasonry and secret societies. I mean, this is something that's existed way longer than the country of Israel, played a role in the formation of the United States. George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, these guys were Freemasons. Jake, you're from Philly. You've seen the giant Masonic temple there. It's one of the most
next to the
astonishing,
courthouse.
right? One of the most impressive and astonishing buildings in the whole city. They have a big statue of Benjamin Franklin and George Washington right out front there. We really don't know that much about Freemasons and what their goals are and what they really had to do with the formation of the United States of America, the formation of Israel, what they do to this day. There's a lot of Freemasonic symbology surrounding this murder of Charlie Kirk. And not to go back to that, but we have spoken about it in past shows. And to me, one of the strangest things about the murder of Charlie Kirk is that when you zoom out on the situation, the guy was a podcaster, an influencer, and a political pundit, really. He wasn't a president. He wasn't a senator. He wasn't a world leader. Maybe he would have been in the future, but he was a young guy. The fact that so much focus has been on his murder, not just in the wake of it, but it does seem like there was some sort of military operation there. It's not JFK. I mean, you can understand all this intrigue surrounding the assassination of a president, but the assassination of a 31, 32-year-old guy who runs a $100 million company, why didn't they just shoot him outside of a restaurant? There's something very strange going on there. And I just wonder to what extent these hidden hands of these, hundreds of years old societies that go back to the Knights Templar and even the biblical days, what are these things doing and how do they influence our society today?
Well, you just said that Kirk and JFK are different, but they could be the same thing, because you also brought up Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, and those types of things, and how our current day kids are being influenced. And one thing about Charlie Kirk, and if you want to go back to JFK, was the influencing of America. And why did JFK need to be taken out? For whatever influence he was going to have on America at the time. Why did Charlie Kirk have to be taken out for whatever influence he was having on America at the time of his death? I don't know, but we are a separate. You brought up the racism angle, and that was something that was trying to be merged. You came up pretty much the same time I came up. I'm probably a little older, but I don't know. Maybe you just had better cream of wheat than I did. But the fact of the matter is all this stuff, and you want to bring it back local. You have a mayor.
Do you feel that I'm right? I mean, in the 90s, wasn't it way less of a consideration that everything
Hey.
seems racial now?
I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, and I was listening to Grandmaster Flash and Mel Mel and break dancing on pieces of cardboard.
Yeah.
And yeah, we didn't care about that stuff.
Nobody did. We had it all. They, you know, even if you want to talk about that, I don't agree. I've said this many times. There's no such thing as transgender in my world, in my book. It's two genders. But even gays, they want you to hate everything that's not you. I'm supposed to hate you because you're a Jew. You're supposed to hate me because I'm black. I'm supposed to hate Greg because he's white. None of that stuff when we were coming up made any sense. And I think every time we get above that hump, we have that catastrophic event, whether it's George Floyd, JFK, Charlie Kirk, to bring us back. So is there magic hands, as you just stated, that says now's the time to mold this world with those magic hands? I don't know, but you have a mayor. You also brought it back local. Look at your mayor, based on whether you want to talk about anti-Semitics, or whatever. Look at his comments regarding Iran, the Jews, and things of that nature. This is not years ago. This ain't 79 or 83 or 53. This was last week. So I don't know where we go from here. We have to get out of this hole, whether it's after the Iran, when we come back into that bedroom, me and Brooke got to duke it out, figure out the best way to go at it. I was at a table, we didn't have too much food. My wife always gets on me. If you could take the food off the plate without getting stabbed with the fork, it was your food. Today, that would be, someone would go to jail for it, but back then it was called eating. So I don't know. I think all of this stuff may be intertwined because it's our Congress. Greg brings up a bunch of points. Like, what is our Congress receiving and benefiting? How are they benefiting from these events?
Yeah.
Well,
whether it's we got to stop because you just brought up a lot of really good stuff. One is the social media platforms. So the algorithms, if you want to call it the algorithms, or however that all works, and I'm sure Jason could tell us. So you as you're looking through and you're interested in something, you get more of it. So and our young people, as a father of three sons, and I have a daughter, but the three sons I worried about more. As they're going through and they're looking at their social media, they ask really good questions. And I had originally talked about this piece that I had forwarded about. It was about Iran and our strategy behind doing what we did recently. And then I peeled back who the source of that information was, and I wasn't real happy with the source. And I could tell because of the source what their goal was to put this information out in social media. And then you start gravitating towards that. So, in our day growing up before the internet, this presents a whole new problem to our young people today because they're getting bombarded with this stuff. And then you have really dynamic people such as you brought up Carlson, and there's Nick Fuentes. And so, some people, they listen to something, they swallow it hook, line, and sinker. They don't say, "Hey, let me look at the sources that, and the other things that go with it." And history, according to TikTok, religion, according to TikTok, a 5-second soundbite, and they believe that it's actually true. And you have a conversation with somebody, and you say, "Where did you get that?" And I said, "Well, they said I saw it on TikTok." Well, that's not a good reference. You got to dig deeper. So,
and the other thing, Greg, is that just even in the last, let's say, 3 to 5 years, this emergence of artificial intelligence, it's become so difficult to know. Even the most realistic photograph or video could be completely fake. I mean, it's just every week that technology is getting better and better. There's this Chinese video model called C-Dance 2.0 that's just been tearing up the internet. You see Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise fighting on a building. Hollywood is going crazy because now someone on their laptop can put together a video that used to take a visual effects crew and a Hollywood production budget. And as far as someone wanting to use that technology, and I'm not trying to say, oh, this is bad, we shouldn't have it. I'm just saying, like any technology or any tool, if you take a screwdriver and fix the refrigerator with it, that's very useful. You get on the subway and stab somebody in the neck, it's a weapon. So, these are tools. And what you're talking about with young people watching social media, I think people are maybe more susceptible than ever to deception.
Exactly.
Well, Jason, you just brought up the fact about the tools in your industry. I've seen where major film studios are going into the AI. They are having that Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt fight, and they said they're going to have these movies that can be made in a week. And I remember years ago when you had SAG protesting because of all this stuff being ahead of the curve, and now it's here, and you have whatever. You had just Netflix and Paramount fighting over who has I think it was Netflix and Paramount Plus.
Warner Brothers,
Warner Brothers, yes, all of the studios. Because now they can make stuff cheaper because they don't have to pay the actors. They can get they may be able to buy the rights to Tom Cruise. I don't know.
This is the problem. This is a business problem, of course, and actors don't like it that you can use AI to, recreate their likeness. It's an interesting problem for sure. And, lawyers have got to love this because anytime there's a fight like this, they're the ones who are going to make money. But again, it's a technology, right? When photography was invented, I'm sure, painters who were into painting realistic portraits of your family said, no, this is terrible. You can't have photography. It's got to be painted. And now, of course, almost nobody would get a painting of their family versus a photograph, at a wedding or whatever it might be. And when motion pictures first came out, vaudeville actors didn't like it because they're saying, wait a minute, you're saying now we can do this performance one time and you just pay us once and then people can watch a film of it again and again. No, my business is based on every Friday night somebody comes out to the theater and I sing a song or do a play or whatever my acting performance is. So anytime these technologies have come out, it has affected somebody, and you can record somebody's likeness and play it back, whether it's on film or video or an artificial intelligence. The one guy who I saw speaking about this intelligently was Matthew McConaughey. He said, look, you can't put this toothpaste back in the tube. This technology is here. And the thing that actors and people need to do is to trademark their likeness. And I think it was him also, or maybe this was another actor who was saying that somebody had already come to him and said, oh, we want to pay you to be in some artificial intelligence thing where they're just licensing the guy's likeness. So, okay, I bet you an actor like Tom Cruise, if he sat down and thought about it, would love this, because now Tom Cruise can appear in Mission Impossible movies for the next 30 years looking like he's 50 instead of, getting puffier and puffier and having more plastic surgery. There's like any technology, there's a positive side to it, there's a negative side to it, and I think it's got to be done. I don't agree with people stealing other people's intellectual property and misusing it, but I think there is a way to engage in utilizing licensed properties or even doing things in a form of parody that is protected and is a fair use of existing properties that makes business sense. A lot of people like to make these fan fiction movies, or I see there's one guy on X who's called like Sith Daddy or something like that. And he'll do like, Darth Vader singing Careless Whisper or something like that. Now, obviously, that's not a Star Wars movie. People who want to see Star Wars movies are not watching Darth Vader singing George Michael, and that's taking some money away from Star Wars somehow. In some way, it actually elevates both Star Wars and George Michael, because these things are such a part of the cultural fabric that it creates a funny video mashup. And I think this guy should be allowed to use those characters to do stuff like that.
Well, speaking of which, AI creativity, Greg's former self on cardboard. Can you show us an example of all those things meshing?
Why, yes, I can. I actually have just released an AI video. Let's give it a watch right here.
Check it. KRG. Yeah. Little Rock to the Big Apple. Real talk. Books. Open them. Numbers don't lie. I see Charles with the magnifying glass. Calculating cash. Looking at the foundation. Wait. Check the filing, no compliance, told to silence. He finds the gaps in the ledger. Measure the pressure, the paper trail leads to the south. Watch your mouth, on it, keep it honest. He's crunching the data, seeing you later, or tell on the case, right in your face. Where did the billions go, does anybody know? Where did the billions go, does anybody know? Facts, hard facts, heavy lifting, moving through the documents, sifting. He found the fraud in the charity, lack of clarity. Tax fall is looking real thin, where you been? Arkansas, Washington. All the same, playing the game, broken, systems broken, words unspoken. Hotel brings the heat, no retreat, heavy, it's getting heavy. He's crunching the data, seeing you later, or tell on the case, right in your face. Where did the billions go, does anybody know? Where did the billions go, does anybody know?
Add it up, subtract it, divide the lies, subtract the prize, look at the math, feel the wrath, the truth is coming, no more running.
He's crunching the data, seeing you later, or tell on the case, right in your face. Where did the billions go, does anybody know? Where did the billions go, does anybody know? Keep digging Charles, the spreadsheets tell a story. No glory, just the numbers, B.I.G. 96 style, yeah, out. Where did the billions go, does anybody know? Where did the billions go, the billions go, the billions go? Does anybody know?
Cut. That was great. Can we reset the building and try one without the helmet? So that's the notorious AIG, entirely created with AI. But the other thing that a lot of visual effects artists and animators object to is people might look at that and say, oh, you know, you're just typing something into a prompt and telling the computer to make it. That's not true at all. That took me about 5 days of 20 hours a day working on that to get it like that. Now, it's true that if I had done it with traditional clay animation, that might have taken 6 months and maybe a crew of half a dozen people or more, and it would have cost probably 6 figures to put together a 2.5 minute fully clay animated video with those effects and all that. And even if I had done it with a traditional computer animation crew, before I got into broadcasting on YouTube and social media and being an independent journalist, I ran a company called 21st Century 3D, and we did visual effects and stereoscopic cinematography for motion pictures and a lot of animation and stuff. And even with my animation crew, which at the largest point was about 7 people, we could not have done an animation like that in months and months. So the fact that I, as a single individual, can do that in a couple of days, I find incredible. And what I was doing is I was creating the elements in artificial intelligence. You know, I designed the notorious AIG character by going through a lot of iterations and combining different things from different outputs in Adobe Photoshop. And I created visual effects elements that I then composited through a traditional visual effects pipeline to make that video. So in my view, this is not taking work away from traditional animators, because it's not like I would have gone and hired some animation company for $500,000 to do that video if I didn't have access to artificial intelligence. It just would have never gotten done. So the hope is technology like artificial intelligence will just cause more content to proliferate and hopefully allow people who, just like when, we had this transition. I'm sure you guys remember the movie Blair Witch Project, which was really the first movie shot on digital video to break out and become a major financial success. And it also closely coincided with kind of the dawn of digital cinematography. And one thing that digital cinematography did is it really commoditized the production of movies, of high quality motion pictures. And, much younger people and people who would have never had access to Hollywood level productions were able to become filmmakers. So I think that's going to happen now with, blockbuster kind of visual effects and animations like this. More and more people will have access to this technology, and it should become commoditized.
Well, before we get into the nature and what that video was speaking of, I want to know, how long did it take for you to collaborate with Greg to do that breakdance scene?
That was one of the most difficult. The breakdancing and the strip club were the two most difficult scenes in there, because again, the way AI normally works is you type a message to it. You say, give me a scene of Brad Pitt fighting with Tom Cruise on a building. And if you're using this, unreleased Chinese LLM driven video model called C-Dance, it's operating in China. So it's not yet affected by all the US copyright law. That's why people are able to make all these copywritten characters. What I did here was I created my own characters. Now people might say, oh, that was Notorious B.I.G. I didn't exactly take a Notorious B.I.G. song. Now that was made with an AI music generator that might run into legal problems of its own. I don't know how it was trained, but again, I consider that a parody and a fair use, just like, Biggie or any music person might sample a song and use that in their own song to make something new. That's what I view as that part of that usage. If they're unhappy about it, maybe I'll get in trouble. I hope not. But, the characters I created, there's Charles Ortel and everything. And it was very, very difficult to get them to, in other words, to get the breakdancing done. I was prompting a still image AI generator to make Charles in different poses. And I cut him out from the background and had him essentially on a green screen, like you would if you were shooting an actor for visual effects. And then I used green screen, chroma key compositing to composite, Biggie sing or AIG singing and the dancers. Those were all different elements that I combined together using 3D camera tracking and all kinds of really complicated visual effects techniques.
Well, let's get into the substance. We were talking about that. I'm assuming that video was talking about Clinton and the fraud, and we can also segue into the Minnesota fraud. But we had a fraud in the White House who actually it was a friend of the fraud in the White House previously, who taught Greg how to break dance. Corn Pop taught Greg how to break dance. So
Corn Pop was a bad dude.
Yes. But speaking of the substance, I mean, one of the big things, I know we were talking about Iran and the cost and the big corporations, and I still think all that twine is intertwined. You had billions with a 23-year-old uncovered in Minnesota. You have billions being uncovered in California. Your Notorious AIG just discussed millions and billions being stole through that foundation. What you doing, you didn't just do the Notorious AIG to discuss fraud just for the Clintons. I think you see it going all over the place.
Absolutely. That video was a little bit because Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were going to testify and did testify yesterday. And of course, people who watch Crowdsource the Truth know my co-host, Charles Ortel, who was the guy doing the breakdancing. He is a very sophisticated financial fraud investigator. And he really was one of the leading voices just in even discovering that the Clinton Foundation was a fraud. Because, part of the way it works is some of these biggest fraudsters in the world are relying on their public image and having such a, nobody would think, oh, Bill Clinton, he's curing AIDS and whatever. And who are you, Jason? You're just some loser. He was the president and this and that. But the point is, he's stealing billions and billions of dollars through the foundation. They went and testified, yesterday or whatever, Monday, whatever day it was. And they asked Bill Clinton, have you ever lied under oath? And he said, no. It's like, whoa. First of all, you just did. Second of all, you were
What does
impeached for doing it.
lie mean?
Exactly. Depends on what your definition of lie is. But I mean, we as taxpayers and citizens and individuals, we look at these people who operate with impunity and steal billions. And by the way, whether it's Keith Ellison or what's the guy's name, Waltz, they see, hey, Clinton got away with it. Well, let's do it. He was the governor of Arkansas. I'm the governor of Minnesota. It's a template that they've set, right? Bill Clinton had the Arkansas, what was it? The ADFA, the Development Financial Association, something like that.
What was that? Whitewater and stuff like that?
Well, Whitewater was another thing. Whitewater was a land developer, was like, hey, Bill Clinton, governor of Arkansas, we got all this like swamp land that we can buy for no money. Why don't you use taxpayer money to build an off-ramp on this highway? And then this swamp land, we can develop it as real estate. And what we'll do is we'll have like a Ponzi scheme where all these unsophisticated investors can invest in the land. And then if they miss one payment, we'll keep all their money and we'll steal all the life savings from old people and unsophisticated investors in the middle of the swamps of Arkansas. And you'll get rich and they'll get screwed and you'll go on to become the president. You could just keep doing bigger and bigger and bigger frauds. And ADFA, or AFTA, whatever it was, the Arkansas Financial Development Association, that was doing something with like selling rice and again, just using the credibility of the state. I mean, if somebody contacts you and says, hey, we're from the Arkansas State Financial or the Minnesota, going to help kids with autism fund, you're like, oh, that sounds nice. Sure. Here's $100 to help kids with autism. Meanwhile, they're just buying, Louis Vuitton sunglasses or whatever they're doing with the money. They're just stealing it.
Well, you know what I see in that video, or the notorious AIG, getting back to our childhoods again. And I think this could be beneficial to a lot of people because Schoolhouse Rock taught us all a very lot. We learned, today I'm just a bill and go on.
Exactly.
Go on. So if you take that and expand to, get back to what we were talking about, the divisive nature of our country right now, if you can bring a little levity and education, I think that's a big thing that I'm not sure if you're looking into it. I don't want to be.
No, you hit it on the head. That's exactly what and Schoolhouse Rock, I love. The last video that I made was Injunction Junction about a guy who's been suing me for 9.5 years. Went after my 85-year-old father. We were able to get an injunction against him in Florida. So I made a video, Injunction Junction, what's your function? All about this guy getting enjoined from bothering my father.
Two things real quick. We had a viewer, Honey West, said law enforcement will not be able to use video evidence any longer and they won't be able to trust it. Just a comment. And then secondly, John
Before we move on to that, Greg.
Yeah.
Adobe Photoshop has existed forever. Or not forever, but certainly since 1989, 1990. Okay, so photo manipulation, the viewer is right. that it's now become more sophisticated and easier, and it will be more prolific. But photo and video and visual evidence manipulation has been around for a long, long time. People have seen this photograph of Lee Harvey Oswald allegedly in the backyard holding the communist newspaper and the rifle. Oswald said, "That's not me. Somebody superimposed my face on somebody else's body." And there's a lot of evidence that he was correct. So this concept of manipulating photo evidence, I mean, that's what we were talking about earlier. Seeing is believing is like an old adage. It's no longer true.
Right. And steganography as well. Yep.
Well, the problem is if you have corrupt prosecutors using that, then we're in a world of hurt. It was like the screwdriver refrigerator stabbing in the neck on the train analogy.
Remember Running Man, where Arnold Schwarzenegger was some kind of cop and they take his video, put him into some attack video, and then they throw him in jail based on the fake video? It seemed ridiculous in 1985 or whenever that movie came out, but you could easily do that now on a laptop.
So John wrote in, he said, in regard to AI and body cam, how about the Charlie Sparks officer shooting video? Do you have any questions, or would it be easy to manipulate with his expertise? Jason, are you familiar with the Charlie Sparks video?
I'm not familiar directly with that video, but I can address the question in general. So when you're talking about, I mean, this goes back to what Jake was saying. We want to talk about evidence videos provided by the police and stuff. There are safeguards that you can include, and actually you see these already in certain body cam videos. They have lines that are moving around as the body cam goes. And of course, any fail-safe or safeguard that you put into something can be manipulated and duplicated or whatever, but these things make it more difficult to falsify video. And obviously, when you are dealing with police evidence from a body cam, you bring it into court, and the first thing that the judge will say is, do you raise your right hand and swear that this is a true and correct copy of the video? Now, if you have a dishonest prosecutor or a cop, they make a fake video and they lie and tell you that it's real. But if you have an honest cop and an honest witness and two different videos, that's the thing. What people need to do is they need to rely on their skepticism. And if you just see one video, people had photos the other day. They were like, oh, here's Jeffrey Epstein walking down the street in Tel Aviv. And it's like, okay, you have one photo of that could easily be faked in AI. Do we have eyewitnesses who saw him? Do you have a video of him speaking? Do you have some contemporaneous event? Was he at the Super Bowl and people saw him there and he said something that can be verified? You have to now be much more skeptical of things that you see like this, because we know that this technology exists. When I went to NYU Film School, one of the first things they told us about the invention of motion pictures, the Lumiere brothers in France created the cinematograph, which was the first motion picture projector. And when they demonstrated this technology, it's said that they showed a film of a train coming into a station. And when they projected it on the screen, the people in the movie theater ran out of the place because they thought a train was crashing through the building and going to kill them all. And when I heard that in 1990 in college, I said, that's absurd and ridiculous. But I have come to believe that it's probably true. Because even though I was a stereoscopic cinematographer and a visual effects expert, I went to see this Star Trek movie, I forget which one, but it was in 3D. And in the opening scene, Captain Kirk and McCoy are stealing some artifact from this ancient, this is, Star Trek prequel before they had the prime directive to not upset existing cultures. And they're stealing some artifact from this primitive culture, and they run over the hill. And then you see this army of alien people come running, and they're throwing spears at them and all this sort of stuff. And I'm in the movie theater watching it in 3D, and this spear comes right out of the screen, and I ducked. Now, I fully understand the technology of how this movie was made, but yet my instinctual brain told me, danger is coming at you, get out of the way. And I laughed after I had that instinctual reaction. But if it was 1895 in Lyon, France, and you had never seen a motion picture before, you would not have the intellectual understanding that, oh, what's going on the screen? This is just an illusion and a fantasy and a movie. That's why you see a little baby in a movie starts crying, or a 4-year-old, and the parents say, oh, don't worry, it's just a movie. At a certain point in each of our lives, we've gained this intellectual understanding that whatever is happening on the television or the movie screen, can't hurt you. Your dog sits there and barks at other animals on the TV because they don't quite understand it necessarily. But when people saw that train coming at them, they ran out of the theater because they thought it was actually a train. So likewise, people now need to gain an intellectual understanding that what you see on the screen, what you hear somebody tell you, a social media influencer or a news person or whatever, you should not just accept lock, stock, and barrel without extreme skepticism and verifying it to your own satisfaction. Even what I say, people shouldn't just accept.
Well,
Very good.
well, Jason, it was great having you. We got to have you back. I mean, it was far too long. John did want us to mention that, speaking of being skeptical, there's a lot of stuff going on with Jerry Sandusky, and people think about different things when it comes up with Jerry Sandusky. John and Ralph Cipriano and Frank Parlato are been investigating. And actually, Jason, Frank Parlato is having a non-part series on that skepticism regarding Sandusky. But it goes to what you just were saying. Just because someone says something, we talked about 1895 or Star Trek, 15 years ago, everybody said that this guy did what he did, and everyone in America accepted it. Now there's different facts coming out, but that spear was coming at our eyes, and naturally we got out of the way of possibly the truth. So
well, listen, guys, I really appreciate you having me back. It's always good to speak with you both, and we'll do it again soon.
Well, one thing, if you promise us when you come back, can we have the next version of the Notorious AIG?
The B-side is already in the works, Jake. Sorry about
perfect.
that.
Outstanding.
All right, thanks, Jason.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
Everybody have a great day.